They thought I would always be the good daughter, the one who forgives everything. They were wrong. My name is Elena Morrison, and for 28 years I believed family meant everything. I believed that love was measured by sacrifice, that being the responsible one was a badge of honor. I was the software engineer who worked 60-hour weeks to send money home. I was the daughter who never missed a birthday, never forgot an anniversary, never said no when they needed help. My brother Marcus was different. 3 years younger, effortlessly charming, the kind of person who could walk into a room and make everyone laugh within minutes. Where I was practical and reserved, Marcus was spontaneous and magnetic. Where I chose stability, he chose adventure. And somehow, in our family's eyes, that made him the golden child and me the reliable workhorse. It started when Dad had his heart attack when I was 22. Mom was overwhelmed. Marcus was still in college, and someone had to step up. That someone was always me. I took out loans to cover Marcus's remaining tuition. I moved back home for 6 months to help with Dad's recovery. I rearranged my career plans, my relationships, my entire life around what the family needed. Elena's so responsible, they'd say. Elena will figure it out. And I did. I always did. When Marcus graduated with his art degree and couldn't find work, I helped him with rent. When he wanted to start his photography business, I co-signed the loan. When he met Sarah, a beautiful marketing executive from a wealthy family, and suddenly developed expensive tastes, I bit my tongue and kept supporting him financially. The pattern was so ingrained that I didn't even question it anymore. Marcus would call with some crisis or opportunity, and I'd open my wallet. Mom would mention that they were struggling with the mortgage, and I'd quietly transfer money. Dad needed a new car, property taxes were due, the roof needed repairs. Elena would handle it. But I wasn't bitter. At least, I told myself I wasn't. This was what family did for each other. This was love in action. Sure, sometimes I felt invisible at family gatherings while everyone hung on Marcus's stories about his latest photography gig or his glamorous girlfriend. Sure, sometimes I wondered what it would be like to be the one everyone worried about, fussed over, celebrated. But I had my career, my little apartment downtown, my quiet life. I told myself I was content being the backbone of the family, the one everyone could count on. Marcus had always been different from me, but dating Sarah changed him in ways I hadn't expected. Sarah came from the kind of family that had generational wealth, the kind where dinner conversations casually mentioned yacht clubs and European vacations. Her parents were the type who judged people by their country club memberships and the prestige of their children's careers. At first, Marcus seemed almost embarrassed by the contrast between Sarah's world and ours. He'd make jokes about our family's middle-class roots, laugh about our dad's collection of vintage baseball cards or mom's coupon clipping habits. But gradually, those jokes became less affectionate and more ashamed. I noticed it first at family dinners. Marcus would check his phone constantly, as if afraid Sarah might call and hear our dad's loud laughter or mom's enthusiastic storytelling. He started correcting their grammar, suggesting they should upgrade their wardrobes for special occasions, hinting that they should consider joining the country club where Sarah's family held their events. Image matters in Sarah's circles, he'd explain when Mom questioned why she needed a new dress for his birthday party. First impressions are everything. The changes in Marcus were subtle at first, but they cut deep. He started referring to my software engineering job as Elena's computer thing, as if my 6-figure salary and technical expertise were somehow less sophisticated than his struggling photography business. When Sarah's parents asked about his family, I overheard him describe me as my sister who's really into technology, as if I were some kind of hobbyist rather than a professional. But the real shift came when Marcus started talking about marriage. Sarah had made it clear that she expected a certain level of refinement from her future in-laws. Nothing too dramatic, just some subtle improvements to help everyone fit better into their social circle. Sarah thinks it would be great if Elena could meet some of her friends, Marcus told our parents over dinner one night. You know, successful professional women who could help her with networking. Maybe introduce her to some quality guys. The implication was clear. I was the family failure who needed rescuing. Never mind that I had a successful career and owned my own home. Never mind that I'd been financially supporting half the family for years. In Marcus's new narrative, I was the spinster sister who needed help finding a man in a better social circle. I should have seen it coming when Marcus asked me about taking out a larger loan. "Elena, you know how much I appreciate everything you've done for us," he said during one of our monthly coffee meetings. His voice had that particular tone that always preceded a request for money. "But I'm hoping you might consider helping with something bigger." He explained that he and Sarah were getting serious about marriage, but her family had expectations about the wedding, the venue, the whole production. More importantly, they had expectations about the kind of family Marcus came from. A family that lived in a nice house in a good neighborhood, not our parents' modest two-bedroom ranch that Dad had bought in 1987. "What exactly are you asking, Marcus?" "Mom and Dad have been talking about renovating for years. New kitchen, updated bathrooms, maybe finishing the basement. If they did it now, before the engagement party, Sarah's parents would see that we come from a substantial family." The number he mentioned made me choke on my coffee. $50,000. Not a gift, he assured me, but a loan. The family would pay me back in monthly installments once the renovation added value to the house. I stared at my little brother, this person I'd been supporting financially and emotionally for most of his adult life, and felt something cold settle in my stomach. This wasn't about helping our parents improve their living situation. This was about creating a facade to impress his girlfriend's wealthy family. But looking at Marcus's earnest face, remembering all the times I'd said yes before, I found myself nodding. Because that's what I did. I was Elena the reliable, Elena the solution finder, Elena who always came through. The renovation began immediately. Mom was thrilled with her new granite countertops and stainless steel appliances. Dad spent hours in his updated basement workshop. The house looked beautiful, like something from a home improvement magazine, and every month I dutifully transferred $2,000 from my savings account to theirs, watching my carefully built nest egg shrink while their house value soared. Sarah started coming around more often, and I could see her approving nods as she took in the renovated kitchen, the updated bathrooms, the general air of prosperity that $50,000 had purchased. She was warmer to our parents now, more inclusive in her conversations. She even complimented Mom on her excellent taste in home decor. But something else changed, too. With Sarah's increased presence came a subtle shift in how family gatherings were planned and conducted. Sarah had opinions about restaurants, about holiday traditions, about who should be included in various celebrations. "We should probably keep the engagement party intimate," I heard her tell Marcus. "Just close family and serious relationships. We don't want it to feel crowded or chaotic." I didn't think much of it at the time. Engagement parties were usually small affairs anyway, but as the wedding planning progressed over the following months, I started noticing that many conversations stopped when I entered the room. Phone calls were taken in other rooms. Planning sessions seemed to happen when I wasn't around. When I asked Mom about details, she'd give vague answers. "Oh, they're still figuring things out. You know how complicated weddings can be." When I asked Marcus directly, he'd deflect. "Sarah's handling most of the details. You know how she is about planning." I told myself they were probably just overwhelmed with decisions, trying not to burden everyone with constant wedding talk. I told myself that my feelings of exclusion were probably just wedding stress affecting the whole family, but deep down, something felt wrong. And that wrongness crystallized into certainty on a Tuesday evening in October when I stopped by my parents' house after work and casually mentioned how excited I was about the ceremony. The day before what I thought was my brother's wedding, I was practically buzzing with excitement. I'd taken the next day off work, had my outfit picked out and pressed, had even gotten my hair done that afternoon. It felt good to be celebrating Marcus, to see him so happy, to finally have something joyful to focus on after months of financial stress and family tension. I stopped by my parents' house around 7 p.m., planning to help with any last-minute preparations and maybe ease some pre-wedding jitters. Mom was in the kitchen, Dad was watching TV in the living room, and my Aunt Patricia was visiting from Phoenix, something I hadn't expected but was happy about since I hadn't seen her in over a year. "I can't wait for the ceremony tomorrow," I said to Aunt Patricia while Mom bustled around, putting together what I assumed were last-minute arrangements. I know it's going to be beautiful. Marcus looked so nervous when I saw him last week, but the good kind of nervous. Aunt Patricia's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, then concern, then something that looked like pity. She glanced toward the kitchen where Mom had suddenly gone very quiet, then looked back at me with the kind of expression people wear when they're about to deliver terrible news. "Elena, honey," she said carefully, "what ceremony are you talking about?" "Marcus's wedding," I said, feeling the first flutter of confusion. "Tomorrow. The wedding tomorrow." The silence that followed felt like falling down a well. Mom had stopped moving entirely. Dad's TV seemed louder than before, and Aunt Patricia was looking at me with a mixture of horror and compassion that made my stomach drop. "Sweetie," Aunt Patricia said gently, "the wedding was last week." The words didn't make sense at first. They bounced around my brain like marbles in a jar, refusing to form a coherent meaning. Last week? That was impossible. I would have known. I would have been there. No one gets married without telling their sister. "That's not... What do you mean last week?" Aunt Patricia looked helplessly toward the kitchen, then back at me. "The ceremony was last Saturday. The reception was Sunday. I flew in Thursday and left Tuesday morning." My legs felt suddenly unsteady. I sat down heavily on the couch, trying to process what she was telling me. "But nobody told me. I took tomorrow off work. I have an outfit. I was going to help with flowers." That's when Aunt Patricia did the thing that shattered my world completely. She pulled out her phone. "Oh, honey," she whispered, scrolling through her photos. "Look." She handed me the phone, and I saw my brother's wedding playing out in a series of beautiful professional photographs. Marcus in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, Sarah radiant in a designer gown that probably cost more than my car. My parents, dressed in outfits I'd never seen before, beaming with pride. Cousins I hadn't talked to in months, family friends, Sarah's elegant parents, the whole extended family network gathered in what looked like an expensive hotel ballroom. I scrolled through photo after photo, looking for myself. Surely there was some mistake. Surely I was there somewhere. Maybe just out of frame in these particular shots, but I wasn't there. In dozens of photos spanning what was clearly a full wedding ceremony and reception, there was no trace of me. It was as if I didn't exist, as if the family had a Elena-shaped hole that no one had bothered to mention. "I don't understand," I said, my voice sounding strange and distant to my own ears. "How could they have a wedding without telling me?" Before Aunt Patricia could answer, I heard footsteps. Mom appeared in the doorway, her face flushed and guilty. Behind her, Dad shuffled in, looking uncomfortable. And then, like some cosmic joke, Marcus himself walked through the front door, probably coming by to check on last-minute details for a wedding that had already happened. He took one look at the scene. Me sitting there with Aunt Patricia's phone, Mom wringing her hands, Dad avoiding eye contact. And his face went pale. "Oh," Marcus said quietly. "Oh, shit." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I looked at my little brother, this person I'd sacrificed so much for, this person whose education I'd funded, whose business I'd supported, whose house renovation I was still paying for, and waited for an explanation that could possibly make sense of this betrayal. Instead, Marcus looked at our parents. Mom looked at Dad. Dad looked at the floor. And then, in a moment that will be burned into my memory until the day I die, all three of them started laughing. Not malicious laughter, not cruel cackling, but the kind of nervous, embarrassed laughter people make when they've been caught in an awkward situation and don't know how to handle it. The kind of laughter that says, "Oops," instead of, "I'm sorry." "Oh my God, Elena," Marcus said between chuckles. "Didn't we tell you? I could have sworn we mentioned it. The date got moved up because Sarah's grandmother was having health issues and we wanted her to be able to attend." "Didn't Mom call you?" Mom jumped on the explanation like a life preserver. "I thought I told you. When we talked last month about the catering changes, I thought I mentioned the new date." Dad nodded along earnestly. "It all happened so fast. We barely had time to adjust everything ourselves." They were all looking at me expectantly, as if this explanation should smooth everything over, as if their casual forgetfulness was a minor inconvenience rather than a devastating exclusion, as if accidentally failing to mention that they'd moved my brother's wedding to a completely different week was the kind of thing that happens to everyone. I sat there holding Aunt Patricia's phone, looking at pictures of my family celebrating the most important day in my brother's life, and realized that every single person in those photos had been informed about the date change except me. This wasn't an oversight. This wasn't a miscommunication. This was deliberate. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I set Aunt Patricia's phone down carefully, my hands surprisingly steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. The laughter had died away, replaced by an uncomfortable silence that felt heavy with years of unspoken truths. "So, let me understand this correctly," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. "Sarah's grandmother had health issues, so you moved the wedding up by a week. You had time to notify every single person in these photos, cousins from 3 states away, family friends, Sarah's entire extended family, but somehow forgot to mention it to me." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Elena, it's not like that. It was just so crazy trying to coordinate with the venue and the caterers and—" "How many people were at the wedding, Marcus?" "I don't know, maybe 80 people?" 80 people. And somehow, in coordinating with 80 people, I'm the only one who didn't get the message. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see the truth written on their faces, the guilt they were trying so hard to disguise as innocent oversight. This hadn't been a mistake. This had been a choice. I stood up slowly, feeling like I was moving underwater. Everything looked the same. The renovated kitchen I'd paid for, the comfortable furniture, the family photos on the walls that now felt like museum pieces from someone else's life. But something fundamental had shifted, and I knew with crystalline clarity that nothing would ever be the same. "I need to go," I said quietly. "Elena, wait," Mom started, but I was already walking toward the door. "Elena, come on," Marcus called after me. "Don't make this into a big thing. We can celebrate together now. We'll have dinner, just family." I stopped at the door and turned back to look at him. My little brother, standing there in his expensive clothes that Sarah had picked out, in the renovated house I was still paying for, surrounded by the family who had collectively decided I wasn't important enough to include in the most significant moment of his life. "Just family?" I repeated. "Is that what we are?" I left without waiting for an answer. The drive home passed in a blur of streetlights and stop signs that barely registered. My apartment felt different when I walked in, smaller somehow, like a place where someone lived who didn't matter very much. I sat on my couch in the dark for a long time, not crying, not angry, just empty. Over the next few weeks, they tried. Marcus called twice, leaving voicemails that started apologetic and gradually became defensive. Mom sent texts asking how I was doing, as if nothing had happened. Dad, true to form, avoided the whole situation entirely. But something had broken that night that couldn't be fixed with apologies or explanations. It wasn't just about missing the wedding, though that pain was real and sharp. It was about the pattern that the wedding had revealed. Years of being taken for granted, of being seen as a resource rather than a person, of being valued for what I could provide rather than who I was. I started seeing a therapist, Dr. Martinez, who helped me understand what she called family roles. The responsible one, the caretaker, the financial backup plan, the person who could always be counted on to sacrifice, to understand, to forgive. "What would happen," she asked during one session, "if you stopped playing that role?" It was a question that haunted me as I went through the motions of my normal life. Work, gym, grocery store, Netflix, sleep, repeat. But underneath the routine, something was changing. I was changing. The monthly automatic transfer of $2,000 continued as scheduled. Every month, my savings account got smaller while my family's renovation debt got smaller too. It felt different now, though. Before, those payments had felt like love in action, like family solidarity. Now they felt like taxation without representation. I thought about that a lot. How I'd been paying into a family system that had ultimately decided I wasn't family enough to include in its most important moments. How I'd been funding a lifestyle upgrade that was designed to impress people who apparently shared my family's opinion that I wasn't quite good enough to include. The funny thing was, nobody seemed to notice my emotional withdrawal. The money kept flowing, so as far as they were concerned, everything was fine. Elena was still being Elena, reliable, generous, understanding. The fact that I'd stopped calling, stopped dropping by, stopped participating in family group texts didn't seem to register. Or maybe they were just relieved not to have to deal with my hurt feelings. 3 weeks after the wedding revelation, I made a decision. I called my bank and canceled the automatic transfer. It wasn't dramatic. No angry phone calls, no ultimatums, no big announcements. I simply stopped sending money, the way they had simply stopped considering me family. For the first time in years, I kept a full paycheck in my own account. It felt strange and wonderful and terrifying all at once. A month passed, then another week. And then, on a Tuesday evening while I was making dinner, my phone rang. "Elena, honey, is everything okay?" Mom's voice carried that particular tone of concern that I recognized from childhood, the one that meant someone was in trouble and needed Elena to fix it. "I'm fine, Mom. What's up?" "Well, it's probably just a bank error or something, but the renovation payment didn't go through this month. I called the bank and they said the automatic transfer was canceled. I'm sure it's just a mistake, but could you maybe call them and get it sorted out?" I set down my knife and turned off the stove. This was the moment I'd been both anticipating and dreading. "It's not a mistake, Mom." Silence on the other end of the line. "What do you mean it's not a mistake?" I took a deep breath, remembering Dr. Martinez's advice about clear, calm communication. "I canceled the automatic transfer. I won't be making any more payments." "But, Elena, we have a contract. You agreed to help us with the renovation costs. We're counting on those payments." The irony was almost laughable. They were counting on me. After deliberately excluding me from the most important family event in years, they were counting on me to continue funding their improved lifestyle. "You're right, we did have an agreement. But that was when I thought I was part of this family." "Elena, don't be dramatic. You are part of this family. The wedding thing was just a miscommunication." "Mom," I interrupted gently. "When you were planning Marcus's wedding, when you were coordinating with 80 different people to let them know about the date change, did you think of me at all?" Another silence. "Of course we thought of you. It's just that, with Sarah handling most of the guest list and everything happening so fast, did you think of me when you were taking family photos? Did anyone say, 'Where's Elena? Shouldn't Elena be in these pictures?'" The silence stretched longer this time. "Elena, you're being unreasonable. We made a mistake, but that doesn't mean you can just break your financial commitments." I felt something click into place, like a puzzle piece finding its proper position. There it was. The real priority. Not my feelings, not my place in the family, but my financial commitments. "You know what, Mom? You're absolutely right. We did have an agreement. But here's the thing about agreements. They require good faith from both parties." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means that when you made a conscious decision to exclude me from Marcus's wedding, you broke our family agreement first. You decided I wasn't important enough to be included in family celebrations, so I've decided my money isn't important enough to be included in family expenses." I could hear her breathing on the other end, processing what I was telling her. "Elena, please. We need those payments. The contractors are expecting—" "Didn't we tell you?" I said quietly. The words hung in the air between us like a bridge burning. "What? Didn't I tell you? I could have sworn I mentioned it when we talked last month about the budget changes. I thought I told you about the new payment plan." The silence that followed was profound. I could practically hear her recognizing her own words, Marcus's words thrown back at them with the same casual dismissiveness they'd shown me. "Elena, that's not. This is different. This is about money. This is serious." And my brother's wedding wasn't serious? My inclusion in this family isn't serious? You're being petty. Maybe I was, but for the first time in my adult life, I was also being honest about what I needed and expected from the people I loved. "I need to go, Mom. Give my regards to Marcus and Sarah." I hung up before she could respond. The phone started ringing again immediately. I turned it off and went back to making dinner, my hands only slightly shaky as I resumed chopping vegetables. Over the next few days, the calls and messages intensified. Mom called 6 times. Dad left one awkward voicemail asking me to reconsider this whole thing. Marcus sent a series of increasingly frantic texts, starting with, "Elena, let's talk about this like adults," and escalating to, "You can't just abandon your family over one mistake." But the message that really got to me came from Sarah, of all people. "Elena, I hope you know that the wedding guest list was really complicated with my family's expectations and venue limitations. I hope we can move past this and focus on being family." I stared at that text for a long time, marveling at the audacity. Sarah, who had been dating my brother for less than 2 years, was lecturing me about family obligations while simultaneously justifying my exclusion from their wedding. I didn't respond to any of them. 2 weeks later, Marcus showed up at my apartment. I heard his knock and almost didn't answer, but something about the persistence of it made me open the door. He looked terrible. His usually perfectly styled hair was messy. His eyes were red-rimmed, and he had the desperate look of someone who had been losing sleep. "Elena, we need to talk." "I don't think we do." "Please, 5 minutes. I'll leave if you want me to, but please just give me 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I let him in. Marcus stood in my living room, looking around as if seeing it for the first time. Maybe he was. I realized he'd never actually visited my apartment before. I was always the one who went to family gatherings, who came to them. "Elena, I messed up. We all messed up. But you have to understand, the wedding planning was insane. Sarah's family had all these requirements, and the venue change happened so fast." "Marcus, stop." He paused mid-sentence. "I need you to listen to me very carefully because I'm only going to say this once." I sat down across from him, trying to find the right words. "This isn't about the wedding, not really." "Then what's it about?" "It's about 28 years of being taken for granted. It's about being seen as a bank account with legs. It's about realizing that the people I've been prioritizing my whole life don't actually prioritize me back." Marcus looked genuinely confused. "That's not true. We love you. We appreciate everything you've done for us." "Do you? When's the last time you asked me about my life? Not my ability to help with your problems, but my actual life, my work, my interests, my relationships?" He opened his mouth, then closed it again. "When's the last time you invited me to something without needing me to bring something, or pay for something, or organize something?" Another silence. "When's the last time any of you treated me like a person instead of a resource?" Marcus sat back in his chair, his face cycling through several emotions: confusion, recognition, guilt. "Elena, we didn't realize." "That's exactly the problem, Marcus. You didn't realize. Because you never had to think about it. Elena will handle it. Elena will pay for it. Elena will understand. Elena will forgive." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. But here's the thing I've learned. I don't actually have to do any of those things. I don't have to be the family ATM. I don't have to be endlessly understanding about being excluded and dismissed. I don't have to forgive people who aren't actually sorry. "I am sorry," Marcus said quietly. "I'm really, really sorry." "Are you? Or are you sorry that your actions had consequences?" He didn't answer immediately, which was actually more honest than whatever he might have said. "The payments aren't coming back, Marcus. That part of my life is over." "Elena, please. Mom and Dad are freaking out. The contractors are threatening to stop work. We'll lose everything we've invested in the renovation." I turned back to look at him. "And that's my problem how?" "Because you're family." "Am I?" "Because a month ago, when you were planning the most important day of your life, it didn't seem like I was family. When you were taking pictures to commemorate your wedding, it didn't seem like I was family. When Sarah was making her guest list, it didn't seem like I was family." Marcus put his head in his hands. We made a mistake. No, Marcus. You made a choice. All of you made a choice. And now I'm making mine. The 6 months that followed were the hardest and best of my adult life. Hard because watching your family implode from a distance is painful, even when you know you're doing the right thing. Best because for the first time in decades, I was living for myself. The renovation stopped, leaving my parents' house in a state of expensive limbo. The contractors, unpaid for their work, put liens on the property. Marcus and Sarah had to loan my parents money to cover immediate expenses, money they didn't really have and couldn't spare. The family dynamics shifted dramatically. Without Elena, the problem solver, Elena the financier, Elena the backup plan, they had to face their actual financial reality for the first time in years. It wasn't pretty. Some of the extended family took sides. Aunt Patricia, who had witnessed the wedding photo revelation firsthand, was firmly in my corner. Several cousins reached out to express their support, having suspected for years that I was being taken advantage of. Others thought I was being vindictive and cruel, punishing the whole family for one mistake. I started dating for the first time in years. With my money staying in my own accounts, I could afford to do things I'd never prioritized before: travel, hobbies, dinners out, weekend trips. I discovered I actually enjoyed my own company when it wasn't weighed down by constant worry about family finances. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that this wasn't just about money. It was about respect, boundaries, and self-worth. For years, I'd been operating under the belief that love meant endless sacrifice, that family meant never saying no, that being good meant being endlessly available. But healthy relationships, she explained, required reciprocity. They required mutual respect. They required seeing each other as whole people rather than just sources of meeting your own needs. "What do you want your family relationships to look like going forward?" she asked. It was a question I'd never considered before. I'd always just accepted the roles we'd fallen into, never imagining that change was possible. "I want to be seen," I said finally. "I want to matter for who I am, not just what I can provide." 8 months after I stopped the payments, I received an invitation in the mail, a family Christmas gathering at my parents' house. Not a group text, not a casual mention, but an actual written invitation addressed specifically to me. I stared at it for a long time, remembering last year's Christmas, where I'd brought expensive gifts for everyone and spent the day in the kitchen helping Mom while everyone else watched football and relaxed. This time, the invitation included a note from Mom. "Elena, we miss you. We know we have a lot to work through, but we hope you'll consider joining us. No expectations, no obligations. We just want you there." For the first time in months, I felt a small crack in the wall I'd built around my heart. I called her back that evening. "Mom, it's Elena." "Elena." "Oh, honey, I'm so glad you called." I got the invitation. "Will you come, please? It won't be the same without you." I took a breath, remembering Dr. Martinez's advice about boundaries. "I'll think about it." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. For the first time in our relationship, I wasn't automatically saying yes to make everyone else comfortable. I was going to make a decision based on what was actually good for me. "I understand," Mom said quietly. "Take all the time you need." After I hung up, I sat in my quiet apartment, looking at the Christmas lights twinkling on the building across the street. For the first time in my adult life, I had the luxury of choice, not just about Christmas, but about everything. They had forgotten what I gave because they'd never had to pay the price for it themselves. But more than that, I had forgotten my own worth because I'd spent so long measuring it by how much I could give. Now I was learning to measure it differently, by my own standards, by what I needed and wanted and deserved. And what I deserved was a family that saw me, valued me, and included me, not because of what I could provide, but because of who I was. Whether that family would be the one I was born into or one I chose for myself remained to be seen. But for the first time in my life, that choice was entirely mine to make.